learners, I welcome you to this lesson. I'm teacher Eugene. We are going to look at the location of places using lines of latitude and longitudes. That is for the case of primary 6 social studies. Under that, we shall majorly look at latitudes and longitudes. So we have some keywords before we start our lesson. We have latitudes, we have longitudes, we have latitude, longitude, and a grid reference. We are going to have explanations for each of the words. So lines of latitude can refer to imaginary lines drawn on a map from east to west. Then we have latitude alone as the distance of a place north or south of the equator. As you know, the equator divides the earth into two. So we have that upper part and the part below the equator, which is referred to as the hemisphere. We are going to look at that. Something to note, that is, latitudes can also be called parallels. Why are they called parallels? Reason being they cannot meet at any point. So we look at the major line of latitude as the equator. The equator is the major line of latitude and it is marked 0 degree. So why is the equator marked 0 degree? One of the reasons is that it divides the earth into two parts, which you can refer to as hemispheres. So we have the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. We are going to look at their meaning. So we have also another reason. The equator is the starting point for measuring other lines of latitude, that is to say, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and other lines. So we look at hemisphere. Hemisphere simply refer to part of the globe or Earth divided by either equator or prime meridian. So we look at the northern hemisphere. The northern hemisphere is the part of the world north of the equator. Then we have the southern hemisphere. This is part of the world south of the equator, as we can view from our picture. So we have the equator as the major line of latitude. Then above the equator, you can see we have the northern hemisphere, and below the equator, it is called the southern hemisphere. So distance increases as one moves from the equator towards the north from 0 degree up to 90 degrees. The same applies to the southern hemisphere. We can see in a picture, the equator is so important that it attracts tourists who bring foreign income to our country. It caters for both local and international tourists. So we have other lines of latitude, dear learners, like we have the Tropic of Cancer, which is 23.5 degrees north of the equator. Then we have the Tropic of Capricorn, located at 23.5 degrees south of the equator. Then we have the Arctic Circle, 66.5 degrees north, Antarctic Circle, 66.5 degrees south of the equator. So those are the major lines of latitude. So we have illustrations. We have our continent, which is Africa, showing the major lines of latitude that cross Africa. We have in the middle as the equator. Then we have the Tropic of Cancer above the equator and the Tropic of Capricorn below the equator. Then the two lines are not crossing Africa. That is Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. Then we have the dates and months when the sun is above the lines of latitude. We're majorly going to look at the three lines. That is the equator, Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn, because those are the lines that cross Africa. So to begin with, we have the equator as the major latitude. The sun is above the equator on 21st March and 23rd September. Mostly on those days we experience high temperatures because of the direct sun rays. Then second, we have on 21st June, that is when the sun is overhead the Tropic of Cancer. Then we have 22nd December, that is when the sun is above the Tropic of Capricorn. So those are the 3 lines of latitude that cross Africa. So we have a simple question. Dear learners, what is equinox? This is not new to you. You learned about it in primary 5, and you can simply define equinox as the period in the year when the sun is above the equator or when the sun is overhead the equator. So it is overhead the equator, that is on 21st March and 23rd September. Thank you so much, dear learners. You will find your work on Edmodo. Bye-bye.